Hello and welcome to Ycft. This week we are doing our very first ranking video in celebration of Friday the 13th. We are doing the Friday the 13th films. These are just our opinions and they are going to be quite controversial, I believe. They're so controversial that we couldn't agree on a single ranking. So we're going to be doing both our rankings because they are drastically different.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Would you like to start with your 12th place? What is your least favourite film in this series?
So worst to best, coming in dead last, number 12 for me is Freddy versus Jason. I've maybe only seen this movie twice now. I don't have the nostalgia for it. I think to top it all off, Nightmare on Elm Street, I've said it before on the channel, it's just not my franchise. I'm not very familiar with it. I don't have a lot of the warmness that a lot of people do. And to me, Freddy vs. Jason is definitely more of a Freddy Krueger movie than it is a Jason movie. So a couple of other things, the characters, plotline, I don't know. It's just, this is not one I return to often, if at all. So yeah, dead last, Freddy versus Jason.
For me, dead last, it was always going to be one of two films, wasn't it? It's Jason Takes Manhattan. I do just want to say, I don't think there's a single Friday the 13th film we hate.
No, there isn't.
We can watch any of them.
No.
But this one is dead last for me. I think I'm actually going against what I said in our last video, but my 12 and 11th place flip-flop constantly. The film's just boring. And I realised upon the rewatch for this video that the stuff on the boat is somehow more interesting than the stuff in Manhattan. And ultimately, that's its biggest crime is the film's just boring.
Number 11 is Jason X. I know you have a huge soft spot for this one, and I've tried to like it. I really have. I've tried to like it for you alone, and I can't. Like this, it's just too drastically different from everything I love about the original Friday the 13th franchises. And Jason going to space, Uber Jason, I know these are all things that people recognise as bad but can still really love. And I this is one of those films that fits into that category of, oh, it's so bad it's good, but it's not for me. Every time I watch it, I lose interest. There's hardly any saving graces in it for me. And yeah, it's like, unless you really want to watch it, this is not a movie I would ever choose to watch.
So my 11th place is probably one of the more traditional bottom place ones, is Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. I can give it props for doing something a little bit different. And this movie is batshit crazy. And I genuinely think this would have worked if it wasn't a Friday the 13th film. I even appreciate the little nods towards the Evil Dead franchise that the director put in there. But overall, I just don't think it's not a good movie. The family plotline just doesn't work for me. Stephen is a great final boy, but we don't have a good final girl. There's not enough Jason in it. The body swapping element, I don't know, we miss out on a cool design for Jason. It's not surprising that it's near the bottom of at least one of these lists.
That's totally fair. So yeah, coming in at number 10 for me is Jason Takes Manhattan. I have tried with this film so many times. And yeah, I agree with what you said. The biggest crime of this movie is it is boring. I get distracted so easily, too easily, when I watch this film. I don't like our final girl. I don't like our final boy. The runtime is a little bit too high for what it is. And I really hate what they do with Jason in this one, reverting him back to being a little boy. It doesn't make any sense, the connection that he has with Rennie, our final girl. I just don't really ever enjoy it. And I know that the script got butchered, and I can appreciate that, but as a film, this is not one I ever really would choose to watch. Yeah, it bores me, and that's one thing a film just can't. I can't forgive a movie for.
It's rather bloodless as well. Scenes like the boxing scene on top of the rooftop in Manhattan, there are good points in it, but
there are some scenes that I like. Yeah, the boxing one, for instance, is top. I like the dog in it. But I mean, aside from that, there's not really a lot going for it for me.
Yeah, so my 10th place is Freddy vs. Jason. And this is purely based on nostalgia. The characters aren't very good. The story's not very good. And it is ultimately more of a nightmare film than a Friday film. But when they throw down, I am just grinning from ear to ear. I love when they fight. I love Robert in it. I love the portrayal of Jason. I would have preferred for it to have been Kane. I think the guy I have does a good job. But I am not going to deny that this is pure nostalgia for me. This is the film where I started watching the Friday and the Nightmare films so I could understand Freddy vs. Jason. not realizing I actually didn't need to when I was younger. So yeah, pure nostalgia. I know it's not very good, but this is my list, so that's where it's
my
going.
list, so screw y'all. Number 9 for me, controversially, is Jason Goes to Hell. I know a lot of people will be angry that I'm putting this above Manhattan, but
Or even just putting it ninth place.
Ninth place, but okay. So recently we had to rewatch Manhattan and Jason Goes to Hell just so I could confirm this placement. And I agree with what you said earlier. Jason Goes to Hell is ridiculously crazy. It steers way too different from everything that Friday the 13th is. It arguably doesn't belong in the Friday the 13th franchise. It's way too different, but it does hold my attention more than Manhattan. It's a shorter running time for one thing. I think it ups the gore in a brilliant way. There are some cool kills. I like a bit of the humor that we get in it, and it keeps me interested enough, even though it's batshit crazy and it is very different. And yeah, the body swapping thing, I agree, doesn't necessarily work. Trying to bring in a family connection too far into a franchise doesn't really work. But I like Steve, our final boy. He kind of keeps my attention for a while. And all in all, I find it less boring than Manhattan. Hence why it is number 9 and Manhattan is number 10.
And my number 9 is Jason X. I know when I'm watching this movie that it's not a good movie. We know this film only got made because it was taking a long time to get Freddy vs. Jason off the ground, so they needed to make something. And the film had a problem with being leaked online. But like I said, I know this film's bad, but I love it. I enjoy it from beginning to end. It takes its ludicrous story of Jason in space and just goes with it. It knows exactly what it is. And it just works for me. It's an utter popcorn movie. I would even go as far as say it is a guilty pleasure movie. It's just a fun time.
Number 8. All right, so number 8 for me is Part 7, A New Blood. And I should just say, from now on in my ranking, we're getting into the films that I actually quite enjoy a lot, despite
it's the same for me. I
the
think
ranking.
from this point onwards, they're all good films.
Yeah, A New Blood, I think the second half is absolutely brilliant. I love it. It always keeps me invested. It keeps me interested. I love Kane Hodder as Jason. It's the first half. The first half bores me. The first half, I don't remember any of the side characters. And I always think it's a bit of a shame because this is obviously the one after Part 6, which is quite a strong film. And it just feels like we kind of went 10 paces ahead just to go 10 paces back a little bit with Part 7. I love Tina as a final girl. I think she's great. The actress Susan Blue as a mum, I think is great as well. The whole Carrie versus Jason subplot is interesting. But yeah, it's the first half, and it's a very bloodless first half as well. It feels like we've just gone back a few paces from where the franchise was going in a few ways. So yeah, this is 8th place for me.
It's also 8th place for me. We agree.
We agree
on this one. And yeah, I think that last half is phenomenal. The stunt work, the effects, everything about that last half is incredible. Up until the ghost dad, the zombified dad, I think that was a bit lame. But that first half this film was cut to pieces by the MPAA, and it just shows the side characters. I don't think those side characters would have got any more interesting if they weren't cut to death, but at least their deaths would have been a bit more gory. That first half really does pull it down, but that last half is what keeps it above the likes of Jason X and Freddy vs. Jason for me, and really cements Kane as a fantastic Jason.
Number 7 is perhaps another controversial entry for me because people will think this is quite low, but it's Part 4, the final chapter. I know people love this one. A lot of people think this is the best one in the franchise. And I kind of understand where people are coming from. It's just, there are 3 different threads in this one with the Jarvis family, with the teenagers partying, and you've also got the brother who's trying to avenge his sister. And for me, the 3 different threads never coalesce in a way that's satisfactory. I think it was a bit of a missed opportunity that the 3 didn't intersect as much as they do in the film. Having said that, there are things I do like about it. Obviously Corey Feldman is great. I like Trish, his sister. I think she puts up one of the best fights against Jason at the end. But ultimately, this one also doesn't really hold my attention as much as some of the others do in the franchise. And I find myself getting annoyed by it because I always think of how better for me it could have been than what we ultimately get. So yeah, Part 4 is 7th place for me.
one of the best window throws in the franchise.
Oh, kudos to the window throw. Yeah, one of the twins going out the window. One of my favourite kills, actually, in the whole franchise.
Yeah. For me, 7th place is the original one, Friday the 13th. And this isn't anything against the movie. It's a bit rough around the edges for me. And I love Pamela Voorhees. Personally, I prefer Jason.
Mm.
If this is on, I will watch it and I will enjoy it. But I would very rarely choose to put this one on just purely because I prefer my hockey mask machete wielding killer.
Mm.
That's I love Kevin Bacon. Like his kill is one of the best in the franchise.
Mm.
It's got a good cast. There's a lot going for this film. Just personally for me, all of the ones higher up in this list, I have more fun watching.
Number 6 is 2009.
The remake.
The remake. I really like this movie. I've seen it quite a few times now, and every time I watch it, I think it gets better. We said when we covered the New Line era in depth that we agree that 2009 pulls elements of the first 4 films together in the one film, and ultimately combines them and uses different plot elements really, really well. I think it's great. It's always really entertaining. The gore is brilliant. Derek Mears as Jason is a fantastic Jason. We would have loved to have seen him again. And one of the things I really love about 2009 especially is it goes back to family, which is something I think a lot of the original sequels kind of lost touch with along the way. 2009 brings Jason back to being a bit more of like a man-child who's grieving his mum. I really appreciate that they kind of went back to basics with it, but albeit, doing it in a way that satisfied 2009 audiences. And yeah, I always enjoy when it's on, and it is not the one that I choose to rewatch a lot, just because it is a lot more brutal and a lot more gory than the others. But whenever I do watch it, I always enjoy it.
Part 6 for me is the final chapter. The holdbacks are very similar to what you said, especially with the brother element. It's not even really made clear which of the previous victims was his sister.
Mm.
I know you can find out who it is, but I think they could have set him up as the prototype for what Tommy would become in later films.
Mm.
The final showdown is amazing. This film has some of the best kills in the franchise. Like I love the corkscrew scene is fantastic, and it just struggles to hold my attention. I think that's because the different storylines don't intercept enough, and I think we needed to see Tommy and Trisha's mum die, which apparently was filmed.
Just deleted from the final cut. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good film. It just doesn't hold my attention as much as everything else on this list. I'm going to break the pattern here a little bit because we have another similarity in the next one.
We do. We agree.
This is probably our most controversial. Just because of how high up it is, the fact that it's above part 4. But for us, in 5th place, is part 5, A New Beginning. And after dropping that bombshell, over to Sam.
I will always defend part 5. I have a huge ton of fun with this. It doesn't matter for me that the killer is ultimately not Jason Voorhees, because let's be honest, we have a Jason Voorhees-esque killer throughout the entire film. He's great. I do think ultimately, the reason and the motive is a little bit weak. But again, they bring it back to family and revenge, which is a quality I think is underrated for part 5. It's considered one of the raunchiest and horniest in the franchise. I have a good time with it. I think the film knows exactly what it is. For me, part 5 also has some of the best, if not the best, side characters in the whole franchise. At least some of the most memorable side characters anyway. So I enjoy it. And I think we also talked about how diverse it is for a Friday movie as well, which is also something that probably doesn't get a lot of, kudos points for. But I always have a ton of fun with part 5. So yes, part 5 is his 5th place.
I know when I put this movie on, I'm going to enjoy myself. I don't mind the whole copycat killer side of it. It in a weird way, goes back to the original, because the original doesn't have Jason as the killer. In this one, Jason's not the killer. I don't mind the copycat element to it. It is a bit bullshit who it is.
Yeah.
Let's be real. But like I said, the side characters are a lot of fun. There's some really good kills. And overall, this film it feels more fun. Yeah, I think it was personally a step in the right direction, but I understand why people didn't like it and didn't like the reveal.
Mm-hmm.
I like how we followed Tommy's story on from the previous film. Obviously, having Corey Feldman return for the opening scene, which couldn't finish the rest of the film because he was doing the Goonies. But he does disappear halfway through the film, which I think is a major downside because they needed him to be a suspect. So there's a little bit, it's a bit of an unbalanced film.
It is. I will also just like to add that this is my least favourite Tommy of the 3 films where we have Tommy. I don't necessarily like what they did with him in this one, but again, there's more pros to me in 5 than cons.
Yeah, it's just an enjoyable film.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is probably our most controversial take.
In the top 4. For me is part 6. So I flip-flop quite a lot if I wanted to rank 6 above 5. And ultimately I did, because I do think 6 is technically a better film. I like the gothic attributes to this one. I know a lot of people have a few issues maybe with the humour. It's quite a self-aware movie, probably the most comical that we'd seen in the franchise up until this point, but it works for me. And again, side characters in a Friday movie are really important, and I like the ones that we have here. I don't necessarily rate Megan as a final girl that much. I do think she's a bit overrated, but I enjoy the movie as a whole, that I can kind of see past any flaws I have with her. I think it's CJ Graham who plays Jason in this one, and I think he's a fine Jason. Like, I think he's great. There's some genuinely scary, tense moments in it, which I like. I like the fact that we have kids in this one. This is an actual working camp. That's quite rare for a Friday the 13th movie. And yeah, I always enjoy part 6. It's up there for me as one of the best.
For me, in part 4 is the 2009 remake. This is just a good film. I like that it takes elements from the first 4 films. Like I say, we see Jason as a child witnessing his mother's death. We see Baghead, potato sack Jason. We see him get the mask, and it ends in a house full of kids partying with a separate family story. And I think it all just blends together really well. Derek Mears is a really good Jason, but we have Jared Padalecki, who is just he's good looking and he's brooding. It just works. He's a good leading man. Travis Van Winkle is amazingly despicable in this film. He's so unlikable, but he's also just so good. And I love how his character, Trent, is the exact same character in a Transformers movie.
Potentially the same person.
I just always have a great time watching this movie. And we know if the lawsuit hadn't happened, we most likely would have got another film with Derek Mears, because it did very well. And I think this is probably actually another controversial take, me having it within the top 4. But I probably watch this film at least once a year, maybe even twice, because it's just good. But that seems to be what pulls it down for a lot of people, is that it doesn't do anything different. Well, Friday the 13th's done differently in the past, and it's never gone down very well. Like I said, Jason going on a boat and then to another city. Jason going to space. Jason being a body swapping demon thing. These haven't famously gone down well. So why, when they went back to a traditional formula, did people not like it? But for me, going back to that traditional formula is why I like it. There's a quality to it. Maybe it's the polish. There's a polish to it. Yeah. Top 4 film for me.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said there. So in 3rd place for me is part 3. I love part 3. It's the wacky 3D with, not very scary, not very jump scary 3D shots. I don't care. It all works. I like all the characters in this one. Part 3 for me is different enough from the original 2. You can start to see that they're experimenting with a few different things, but it still feels like an OG Friday movie. I think the guy's called Richard Booker who played him in this one. I think he's a great Jason as well. I like the showdown with him and Chris in the barn at the end. And yeah, it's a simple classic formula that this one sticks to in terms of plot, but I like it. That we've talked about in our video, that we have a few issues with the Chris and Jason backstory that's kind of left ambiguous. But that aside, this is a fun movie. It's so 80s, it's ridiculous, and if it's on, I'll always enjoy it.
And 3rd place for me is part 2. This for me, it's just a good film. It is a perfect sequel to me. And it has some of the best characters. It has some great deaths. Jason himself, I like the mountain man look. And I like the Town That Dreaded Sundown bag on his head.
Yeah.
This is just a really, really strong film. It's a very strong cast. I like the counselor in training element that they go with.
for sure.
Because people often think that all these films are just the same as all at summer camp, but it's actually not.
And for me, second place. So this again, I oscillate all the time with second and first place with the Friday the 13th franchise. It just happens to be that on this particular day, second place for me is the original. The first Friday the 13th, the OG. Ask me any other day, this could be my number one. But I adore the first film. I know for a lot of people they find it quite slow. It ranks somewhere in the middle to the lower end of the ranking for people. I love it. I embrace how kind of slow it is and how almost sort of like it has that art house feel to it. I love all the characters. I always remember them. I love Pamela Voorhees as a killer. I think she's a wonderful serial killer, very underrated. I don't care that we don't have a Jason in this because she is so good. The showdown with her and Alice at the end is great. Alice is a great final girl. You know, people have issues with like random scenes where she's making coffee for what feels like 10 minutes straight with very little action. I love it. I accept it for what it is. And this is probably my most rewatched of the entire franchise too. I will always choose to watch this one. I love it. I never really get bored of it. So yeah, the OG is always very high for me.
And second place for me is part 6, Jason Lives. They made such a big deal of Jason's return after part 5, and it was a genius move to finally solve the problem of how can we keep bringing Jason back. Let's just bring him back from the dead. I think there's a much better interpretation of Tommy. This film is so steeped in the 80s with Alice Cooper on the soundtrack. Some amazing set pieces like the, is it a Winnebago? Whatever it is. The weird camper truck thing. It's great.
Yeah,
that whole set piece is brilliant. All the kills stand out for me in this film. And I think the side characters are all really fun. We have kids at the camp, like you were saying earlier. This isn't just a good film. This is a very good film. I think CJ Graham is a great Jason. This film, unfortunately, also got cut to death by the MPAA, but it managed to pull through. We were denied seeing the triple decapitation.
Yeah.
But we were blessed with the Jason who has the best ass.
Yes.
So well done, CJ Graham. Yeah, this is just, it's a high point, and this really saved, for me anyway, it saved the franchise and put it on the right path. The franchise might not have followed that path properly afterwards.
No.
But considering what the reaction to 5 was like, this film was just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And this is just, it's a fantastic movie. It really is.
Yeah. Course corrected maybe, you know, what 5 did.
Yeah.
For the fans.
And secured a reason why Jason could keep coming back.
Yeah.
They didn't have to explain it anymore.
And also he's not in the box.
He's not in the box. No, we see him a lot. Yeah, I say it didn't have to explain. They very rarely explained how he came back anyway. But now this is a logical reason.
Yeah.
Oh, he's an undead zombie. Great.
Yeah.
Anything can wake him up now.
Yeah.
So what is in your first place? I mean, if people are keeping track, you probably work this out.
Yeah. Right now, today, number 1 for me is part 2. I love it. I think this is definitely one of the strongest in the whole franchise. Ginny as a final girl, oh my goodness. She's one of the best. Absolutely adore her. I love the whole psychology element that she uses to like try and understand Jason. I love her and Paul together. I think they're a nice little final duo. I know I mentioned earlier that part 5 has some of the more memorable side characters, but I think part 2 just clinches it with the best. They did something right with the side ones in this one in a way that all of them are memorable. All of them are blessed with a decent kill. There's some really good tension in this one. It's again, very simple formula, but it just works. I really, really love 2. I never get bored of watching it.
And first place for me is part 3, Friday the 13th, 3D. I accept all the problems with this film, but the pros far outweigh the cons. And some of the cons are actually pros for me. I adore the egregious 3D shots. It dates the movie for me in all the right ways. I remember when it was going to be airing on TV and I had to pick up a particular newspaper so I could get 3D glasses out so I could watch it at home. That was just, it's such a core memory for me watching this movie. He gets the iconic hockey mask. Jason is not in the box for the third film for a film where we had to hide who the killer was in the first one. We had to hide somehow that Jason was back in the second one. We know Jason is back. We see him in the background. stalking his prey. And yeah, the downside of his relationship with the main character, I'm not a big fan of that. But I like how Jason is always around and we can see that he is around. It's got some really good deaths, some good action sequences. If anyone ever says, do you want to watch Friday the 13th Part 3? I will never say no. I will always happily watch this film. I rewatch it quite often. And there's never any doubt for me that this is my favourite Friday the 13th movie. And I will fight anyone who says that it's not a great film. It's massively underrated.
And there we are. There's our ranking.
That is our very first ranking video. We hope you've enjoyed it. Just bear in mind, these are our opinions.
Yeah, and
they are going to differ.
We agonised over this, guys. Like, we rewatched some of the worst ones just to be absolutely sure of our placement because we wanted to be right with this.
Which is your guilty pleasure Friday the 13th movie? And what is your rankings like? Do you have a strange ranking? Is there anyone out there who has Jason X as their favourite?
Tell me why Jason Goes to Hell is not your least favourite. I can't be alone out there in the world.
Well, it's also not my least favourite. But again, that could change. Like I said, in previous lists it was bottom for me. But watching them we watched them back to back. It's again purely just because it keeps my attention. This whole franchise varies so much in quality.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah. I think for me, what I've learnt now is my two biggest crimes for a Friday movie are if it's boring and if it tries to hide Jason. Like those are two things I can't really forgive or get past.
Well, thanks a lot, guys, and happy Friday the 13th.
Happy Friday the 13th.
And we will see you next week.